anger and rage. So we've all seen recent developments in the United States, particularly in the capital, Washington, D.C. National Guard has deployed. Now, we don't want to get into the politics, but let's address the anger that a person who is serving internalizes, and also the anger that's exhibited towards them. How does that impact them? Today on Bets and Badges, we will continue our discussion, the neuroscience of self-mastery. My co-host today is Dr. Pamela Serafin, neuroscientist and futurist recognized as a global authority in neuroscience for higher stakes leadership and human performance. She is also an international best-selling author of the book titled Neuromastery. Welcome, Doctor. How are you?
Thanks, Robert. Great to be here.
Always good to be with you. And you have brought on a special guest to discuss this topic, right? Go into detail about this particular topic. His name is Dr. Edward Buckman. Dr. Buckman is a fellow law enforcement officer who also served in the United States Marines. He is currently working at the University of Tennessee in the investigative division. Doctor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you all so much for having me today.
Thank you for your service, brother. Stanley. So let's narrow it down a little bit. So this episode will examine the neuroscience and cultural roots of anger, aggression, and rage, both inside, as we had said, the first responder community and directed at it. The conversation will blend lived experiences, leadership insight, and applied neuroscience. What does the neuroscience have to say about this? Doctor, I'm going to lead it off with you, Dr. Serafin.
Now, if we're going to talk about this, first of all, let's separate the topics here where anger is an emotion and aggression is a behavioral output and rage is a biological state, is the collapse of your ability to control your brain state. So it's an absolute collapse. So you have no control over yourself in the rage state. Now, and as we lead up to that, you've got to take that into consideration because it's very easy to look at people in that state, especially when they're killing people, that you think, well, they should have known better. They did it on purpose. They pulled the trigger multiple times after the person was already dead, and they did all these steps. While reality is they had no control at that point. And so that alone changes a lot of things, right? Because of course the laws were made, the justice system itself was made before we even knew how the brain actually works. It's changed. And of course they're not going to change all the laws. They're in place now and the systems are in place, but you have to deal with reality. Like I said, this is the state of the brain. They have no control at that point. And so of course we've got to talk about, well, how did they get to that level?
Great question. Ed, Dr. Buckman. Let's make it a little more simpler for you and I. Let me call you Ed and you call me Robert.
Yes, thank you.
You know, having served in the military and then law enforcement now at the University of Tennessee, brother, I'm sure you've seen some of those actions that Dr. Serafin speaks about where you get a subject that's so caught up in the moment of the heat of the battle, if you will, or the heat of the incident, that they just continuously react in ways that is just impulsive.
Yeah, and Chattanooga is a very busy city, and so we got to interact with a lot of individuals that were just in this heightened state, almost kind of going back to what the doctor said about inconsolable. They weren't processing the words. They weren't being, as much training as we get in de-escalation. It was almost like an impossible task because they were in such a state. Me personally, having been in those states of anger into rage, there's the kind of the two different sections of my life. Having gone through the Marine Corps, and we had 2 deployments, and they weren't very kinetic, but it was a long period of consistent stress. And I did feel like the kind of the pressure cooker event going on within me, being able to moderate my emotions. And then the parallel, it was a single incident while being a police officer. It happened in one day. It was a terrorist attack. 4 Marines and a sailor were murdered. And then the repercussion on that, it was immediate. It was days and then weeks and months afterwards, but I felt that repercussion in a very focused time frame. So you got the kind of the slow drip effect, and then the water hose breaking, but the end result were very similar in a heightened state of anger. Small things kind of set me off, and it was something that it took a lot of time to kind of recognize and then recover from.
So I'm glad you're personalizing it, because that's what I wanted to get to, right? I wanted to lead to that personal feelings that one has, the range of emotions. And Dr. Seraphin, please help us out, because, I've struggled with this phenomenon, right? I struggle with trying to understand, why is it that here we are as trained public servants, professionals, and yet at times we have similar reactions to events that others who are less trained have, and how we can work our way through better understanding what's happening, what the hell's happening, right?
Well, I think let me say it this way. This is how I see it for, let's say, first responders, is that you're in what I call the 2-state trap. You're trained to either suppress your emotions and shut down and stay in control at all times, or it's explosive intensity. It's 0 to 100. You have 2 states that's allowed, and you're trained and conditioned for that. What's lacking is range of emotion, because of your training and because of your job, what you have to do is that you've been taken the state of being able to have a range of emotions, healthy emotions, positive emotions, hasn't even been put into the equation. And that has done significant amount of damage to the human being. You can't have just the calm composure and then go from the rage. And you haven't been taught the skills in place, which are what I call emotional mastery. You haven't been taught the skills. You've been taught those 2, which are incredibly admirable, right? You've at least been trained to master suppression, detachment, and that explosive intensity. But you're missing the processing, and you're missing healthy expression of emotions. So your range has been clipped, and that is there's consequences to that. There's consequences like corruption, like violence, like abuse. There's a tremendous amount of consequences. Now, when you think from a societal point of view, men in general are taught suppression at all time. If you haven't mastered that, you have no control over your emotions, which is what you're going to see with civilians. They don't have control, so they have that aggression. And then you've got this feedback loop between the two cultures, right? The first responder culture and society, or civilians, whatever you want to refer to them as. So you've got that conflict, and without having any skills in place to deal with it. Like I said, it's been so devalued for an emotional range with first responders, and I can see it a mile away, because it's always composure. There's no, like we had talked before about, there's no vitality, or not even that. There's no like excitement or curiosity, or just any amount of just above neutral. And so everything is compressed. And when you compress for a long amount of time, there's no other state than rage. That's very predictable. And now we find that we're shocked when it happens. We can't be shocked that it's happening. It's a setup. It's predictable. They're just patterns. And so that's what needs to be addressed.
Accepting that perspective as you laid it out is pretty scary. Ed, let me run something by you, by both of you guys, but I like your thoughts on this, Ed, since you're a practitioner in law enforcement. Recently, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, we had a homicide of a police officer, young police officer, and we spoke about this offline. Let me set it up here. So we have a 27-year-old Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office deputy. He responds to a vehicular accident, gets to the scene. Apparently, one of the vehicles involved left the scene, right? He follows, I guess, the pieces of the cars and, the pieces, body parts and of the car, and he follows the trail to a parking lot. And when he gets there, he encounters two guys, and quickly witnesses say that the passenger was the driver, that they switched. So the officer speaks to both of them, and that escalates into a physical fight. The subject who was driving attacks the officer. And in that ground battle, because you see them on video, there's video of this, they're fighting on the ground. The subject grabs the officer's gun and shoots him. You don't want to go to jail. That's fine. We see that all the time. Many people don't want to go to jail. Possibility of going to prison blows anybody's mind. What was the explosive piece here and what made it really feel different was the fact that after the subject shoots the officer on the ground, he continues to shoot him many more times as he's cursing and kicking and yelling at the officer who's dying, right? Fatally shot. And that in itself felt different also on added piece. The offender was 21 years old. And when I say was, because he went back to the vehicle and committed suicide with the officer's gun. We in law enforcement, we accept the fact that this is going to happen. But what I've seen here is the officers and the community have gone from, can't believe this happened, to, I'm pissed, man. I'm angry. Can you talk a little bit about that and reflect about how you've experienced that and what your professional thoughts on dealing with something like that for the people that are in uniform and going through those moments of they're mad?
Yeah, and so that ripple effect, right? So that anger begets other anger, and then someone down the road. One thing that I don't think I ever recognized this when my time with the city, but here at the university, one thing that I've kind of looked at differently is that we represent authority. And so 21 years old, the suspect, I imagine that if we took a glimpse back into his life, he had other struggles with authority. And that was the boiling point, was that he wasn't going to be taken to jail. He wasn't going to be told what to do. He was rejecting the authority of that officer. And yeah, I see it both, within law enforcement and then towards law enforcement, that rejection of authority or abuse of authority when there's maybe a connection to officers or individuals who become law enforcement officers and then take that authority to the next level, because we've seen that as well, where they believe that they have control over people, and when they lose control, I think that's kind of where that anger would seep in as well. It's devastating when these things happen, but part of the law enforcement organization's responsibility is to intervene and come to these individuals who are feeling that anger, that outrage towards the officer's murder, and have programs, have systems in place to be able to help, like the doctor's saying, is to help be able to process these. Because if it is just bottle that up, compartmentalize it, and move on without the correct processing, it's going to happen a month, a year, 10 years down the road. That pressure cooker will explode at some point in time.
Dr. Seraphin, my question to you is, what's going on in the person's, internally? We who are observing or witnessed this, and this also goes for the National Guardsmen or troops that are now deployed on the streets in many parts of our country or abroad. What does the neuroscience say about this?
Well, no matter what, regardless of what behavior it is, it's still processed through the brain. So it's a matter of brain functioning and structures of the brain. So it's nothing to do with that moment when somebody goes to kill somebody. It doesn't matter how many times they do. It's nothing to do with that. It is Something has happened. Many things have happened, guaranteed to each human being that have, like I said, created that pressure cooker and changed the structure and functioning of their brain. So even from like the hippocampus, say the memory center, chronic stress has changed the function of that area of the brain, sends different messages, distorted memories. Perception has changed. And so it doesn't matter what the event is, it's processing different through the brain. Then you have unresolved trauma. You can't pretend that that you're so tough, it's not going to happen to your brain. It's repetitive. So anything you've experienced is going to be wired in. It's going to change the functioning of your brain. So there's no way of escaping this. And that's why I'm saying about the hard truth. We have to deal with that's what's happening. It's not the evils of the person. And I know it's very easy to want to think that, because we just think, wouldn't that be great if we just can put them in that category? But it's not. It really is the functioning of the brain. And something has happened to that individual that has caused that kind of behavior, that outcome. And no matter what, it's still the brain. And like I said, if you want to talk about the realities, part of it is betrayal, right? Just from a society of believing that, law enforcement isn't corrupt, or the justice system isn't corrupt, or healthcare isn't corrupt, or government is corrupt. Of course, we have human beings working in it. It can't not be. It can't not. The worst thing we can do is keep pretending it doesn't exist, because that's when the betrayal hits. That's when you have emotional or moral injury where it's like, I can't believe my partner betrayed me or my organization betrayed me. Well, you have to factor that in. We have to have the skills in place for when we're betrayed, it doesn't turn into rage and revenge. And that's missing, as if it comes as a shock that all these systems are corrupt. And I'm like, well, they can't not be. So put that on the table first, and then say, okay, let's get the skills in place so that we can deal with it. And that's personal responsibility. But first, they have to have access to the information, which is what we're trying to share here.
Yeah, definitely. And I love to hear like the two of you speak through that incident that Ed, you mentioned about earlier. I mean, thank you for mentioning, and thank you for having the courage to even talk about that, where you were the, I guess a unintended participant in a post-terrorist event, right? I would love to hear the two of you kind of talk through the range of emotions that you went through and the feelings and how you worked through them. And Doctor, if you can help out here.
Let me add this, because if you listen to the show last time, we talked about outliers. And Ed is an outlier, okay? Yeah. So just so you know, this is not your average guy here. And you have tremendous emotional range. I'm not talking about the neutral to rage. We're talking about the positive of a range of emotions. And you have that. And that's very, very uncommon. And that's why you're more evolved, and you've got these skills in place, and you have made your way through it. So that's what I want to highlight here, is that you've done just an exceptional job dealing with this and getting your doctorate, which is spectacular. That's not some small thing, And so your ability to move through all this is so admirable. And I really want to highlight this, because you're not the average. You are an outlier, and that's what needs to be highlighted.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. To the incident, and we'll touch on betrayal real quick. When I was deployed, going through the Marine Corps, you train up. We did extensive training to prepare ourselves for being deployed. We did tactical medicine, we did live fire exercise, we did all of these things. And though my deployments were not kinetic per se, mentally, I believe that I was prepared for those events. And then stepping into law enforcement, we go through training, but different. I was prepared, and I had seen people shot and stabbed. What I was not prepared for was seeing Marines wearing the same camis I wore laying dead on U.S. soil. And that was a betrayal of it was so unexpected. I had never thought that that could possibly happen. And so it was a shock to my system, even though I saw much more egregious, like visually egregious things. They never really, I'm sure that they had an impact, but not like that.
Well, I think you had some of the skills in place to process and express that in other ways. You know, the anger of not just, you know, holding it all in. You had the skills in place. And what you were just saying about the betrayal is so shocking. And I know it sounds really odd to say, but I'm like, you have to get really good with betrayal. Like, you got to make peace with betrayal because it's coming. And betrayal comes the least expected. It's not the people you think are going to do it. And it's not what you think you're going to see. It's the people closest to you, things that you'd never would expect. That's when it happens. And I can tell you, I really don't know anything other than being betrayed my entire life because I have such a long history of trauma. I have been betrayed on all levels. So I come from a different perspective as well, because I am the victim of revenge. I am the victim of rage. I have lived through all this. And if I didn't have those skills in place, I wouldn't be alive. Right? And so it isn't just acting like betrayal's not going to happen. Like I said, we got to get really comfortable talking about this, that it's coming no matter what. This is minor right now. And I hate to say that because I'm not trying to, think, Armageddon's coming, but there's so much more coming at us. Rather, we be prepared with the skills in place. And like I said, just let me finish this, because like I said about the emotional mastery, detachment, suppression, processing, expression. You have to master all 4 stages.
Can you give a brief definition of what you consider betrayal to be?
My thoughts is like when I have like a standard, a personal standard or a principle, and somebody goes against that, or even as something as small as like a trust thing, you trust somebody to get something done. It's I guess you could call it like a micro betrayal that has that personal impact. That sends those waves internally.
I don't have a definition for betrayal, but I'll tell you this. There are different levels and different levels of the depth to it. And that's the same as suffering. And I think that needs to be talked about as well, is because there's different levels of depth to suffering. And I can tell you for myself, I have tremendous amount of depth with suffering. I've lived through that. It's why I understand revenge, and I understand these huge, dark emotions because I've seen it. So it doesn't come as a shock to me because I'm the victim of it. And so the depth of suffering, like when I hear about the young man that shot the officer, the depth of his suffering must have been enormous, like tremendous suffering to have gotten to that state. So it's not small. It's not necessarily small. It's very cumulative. We don't know the situation, and I know nobody wants to kind of see the other side, but I think you have to take that into consideration, because there are different levels of trauma, different levels of suffering, different levels of pain, right? And betrayal. So one person's betrayal, like sometimes, your spouse cheats on you and that triggers rage. Well, for someone like me, spouse cheating on me is like minute. Like, that's so tiny compared to the amount of betrayal that I have experienced. So it's different for everybody, right? So we kind of have to step back and take a, more humane look at it and think, what the hell happened to this person that caused that to be so extreme? Like I just have a tremendous amount of empathy and compassion for humans.
Yeah. So for me, the takeaway right now is, from everything we've talked about, is recognition, right? You first have to recognize what's happening and, sort it out, if you will. And doctor, as you have taught me, and I give you kudos, because for the short period of time that we build a friendship and a professional collaboration here, I see things differently. I recognize that, there's much more. I am much more than the thoughts that are processing in my head, right? You often tell me, it's your brain, right? You're not your brain, or you're not your thoughts. And I'm thinking, what the hell is she saying? Is it my emotions? And what's driving that? And then the energy and the soul, whatever everybody wants to call it, but it's what makes us the essence of who we are. And I'll use that term. So if we're not our brains and we're not our thoughts solely and we're not our emotions, then we have to recognize that. And I guess that's the key, the baseline
We have
to
Yeah.
figuring out how we're going to deal and come out on the other side better.
Yeah.
But there's a
We
lot of
have to
people
have that separation without a doubt. And so when you look at these people that are killing other people, for me, I can see that's their brain. Without a doubt, they have lost control. The brain is running everything. Very little awareness of a soul, of an essence of self. It doesn't exist. So it's not whether or not they're dealing with it. They don't even know it exists. That's the state of affairs, right? Even for you, fine gentlemen, until we get into the weeds of the soul, you're like, you don't even talk about it. It doesn't even exist. And it's like, well, if it doesn't exist, who's the essence of yourself? Who? It can't be your brain. We already know that. It can't be your mind. Those are just thoughts and images. And it can't just be your body. That doesn't make any sense. So it has to be a fourth entity. And so you got to go through life now knowing that other people don't know it exists. So how are they supposed to strengthen it or nurture it or be aware that their brain is completely fucking with them? They had no awareness, right? They are oblivious. They're absolutely oblivious to what's going on. No idea.
And Ed, here's the challenge for us, right? And I suspect it's no different than anyone else, but I use us as an example because, first responders, well, I'm retired now, but those that are still active or those that are serving our country in whatever capacity, in the danger zone, if you will. It's how do they deal with what they see and what they experience coming out of those events? That's the key here is, can you shed some light on that? As a leader, as a person who trains up others, what's your advice to anyone that's struggling, suffering, in conflict, that hasn't recognized that they have to deal with some shit they haven't dealt with?
Yeah, and just kind of doing a little bit of self-reflecting, looking back at in my infancy of self-awareness. And it was something as simple as telling my wife, hey, I'm having a bad day. And that's like the very basics is identifying that there's something not right. And then the steps further are identifying factors which make things aggravants or anxiety, and then identifying that, sharing that. One of the notes I just took down, suffering in isolation. We go through military or law enforcement training and we get through FTO, the Academy FTO, and it's almost like we're expected to know everything. We're supposed to just deal with everything, and almost in isolation. It's almost kind of frowned upon to ask follow-up questions. And then when we're talking about a subject like emotions in a male-dominated workforce industry, to go to a coworker, another male coworker, and saying, hey, I'm feeling kind of anxious. So we're again just kind of bottling this things up. Some of the things that have helped me, one is my faith. I'm a Christian, and having a transcendent cause, having a cause that is beyond me, beyond the police department, the badge, the whatever I'm wearing. It is what is going on here and now. One of the other things that I had wrote down was having a mission over emotions. So often in my personal life and others I see around me, they let their emotions take front and center over their mission. And being law enforcement, military, it's a worthy cause. But so many people get jammed up when they let the here and now emotions interject with that. So raising that mission above the current state of emotion has also helped me prioritize, like, yeah, a meeting went bad, a boss said something, whatever it may be, and recognizing, yeah, that's a small thing, that's a here and now thing. But my mission, whatever that mission is, for me being a Christian, me being law enforcement, I want to help try to change the industry, like on a national level. And so letting these small things, these small obstacles, not letting them deter me, has also helped me be centered in what I'm doing here and now.
Faith, having a belief that it's bigger than you, helps a lot, right? That what we're experiencing is, there's more to life, there's more to our existence Does that fall in line with what your professional experience is, doctor?
For me, I think it's fantastic. If that's what's helping you, then of course, right? Like that, if that helps, I'm all for it. You still have to have the skills in place. There still has to be that, but that's like a bigger picture, right? To be able to have faith. And that's going to help you through betrayal without giving up on humanity. And that's kind of what I want to focus on, because I'm like, we can't give up on humanity. We got to understand that that's the way the brain processes life as humans. And so we got to step back and have that ability, like you were saying, which is metacognition, the ability to think about what you're thinking about, which is difficult when you're in the drift of cognition, when you start to compromise, doing things against your moral judgment, betraying others, lying. You start to drift into compromise and you drift into corruption because your brain is wired differently. Your identity changes, your perception changes. You don't know it's happening. And that's the big difference here. They don't know it's happened. So you were lucky you caught it. You would be like, oh, well, kind of acting like an asshole here. Maybe I shouldn't do that. That's rare. Like it sounds surprising, but it's like, no, you can drift, have no idea you're drifting because it will look like it's other people's fault. I'm this way. The lens you see human beings as has changed. You don't know it's changed. So they do not know. Many people that are doing, terrible things and are batshit crazy, corrupt, don't know they are. They could be in a state of revenge. They don't know that they're in it. And so we've got to be able to step back and be able to, have agency for ourselves, master these skills ourselves first before we start judging others.
But I want to make sure I heard it correctly. That they just are unaware of their actions in spite of how obvious their actions are and should be to them.
Yeah. Not only actions, beliefs, personality, perception of who they are. They're unaware. They're unaware. They just have thoughts and they just act on thoughts because you've been trained. Society has been, the ideology of that you are your thoughts. That is you. The voice in your head is you. No, it's not. Very few people in the world don't know that it's not them. They don't know. So that's the snowball effect. If you don't even know that, and then you think, well, I'm just like, you use logic and they think, well, I am thinking about what I'm thinking about. Like but it's flawed logic because their brain has betrayed them. So they don't know, so it's a different way of looking at it instead of thinking, well, they should have known. They thought it through. They made the plan. Then they killed somebody. They had no metacognition at all. They still have to pay the consequence. So I'm never like, nobody gets a free pass. You pay the consequence. It's too bad you didn't know. You're paying the consequence now. However, we still got to have the cards on the table of the truth of how the actual brain actually works in human beings.
Inside, outside law enforcement, I think society in general look at mental health as a kind of automated or a happenstance of our circumstances. If we get into a car wreck and get a bad knee injury, we go to the doctor, we do rehab, we go to PT, and we work on getting that muscle, that joint, whatever it is, stronger. I don't think a lot of individuals think about mental health the same way. And it should be. And I think law enforcement, because of the circumstances that across the board, individuals are having trauma, are having high stress situations, that law enforcement leadership need to lean into this with, just like we have PT programs, just like we have firearm programs, we need to build in programs and protocols, specific protocols and expectations that, hey, we need to take better care of our mental health and kind of disrupt that cultural norm of these kind of, the wellness programs are a great step, but having a wellness program taught by individuals that don't know these protocols, it's just kind of this cyclical, like this program. And so actually building in, like the doctor's talking about, actual protocols that intervene, that actually individuals can find wellness. And I've said this before, that officer wellness is a pretty low bar. high performers.
Yeah.
High performance, that's
Yeah.
that's a higher standard. And I think law enforcement leaders need to lean into their officers' wellness overall. And that's gonna have a successful mission impact. When it's been said, hurt people hurt people. And so if you have broken officers, they're not going to be the best out there for the community that they serve. If we have officers that are doing well, that are functioning well in their personal and their professional lives, that's a better product. That's better customer service for them on the back end.
I 100% agree with that. And I want to add to that. And that's the topic of mental health is brain health. We've got to stop acting like mental health isn't coming from the brain. It is brain health. We can't help it that, the ideology and the narrative has been in place for decades that it was all mental. They didn't know where mental was coming from. It is the brain. So we're talking about brain optimization. We're talking about human optimization and high performance. And that's why I'm saying that exactly where I'm coming from as well. And that's for leadership and self-leadership. It should always be elite, high performance. And these are the skills you need in place to keep you elevated at that level.
Doctor, you just said it, that leadership starts with self-leadership. There's leadership development programs, there's books, and it seems like some of them are so outward focused. How do I lead others better? And sometimes the target is missed because the individuals aren't leading themselves well. They're not taking care of themselves, both mind, body, soul, and spirit. And so for me, leadership, it does start with self and a heart transformation that you've really got to want to help other individuals, serve them well, to have a impact.
Yes, and this is why when I talk about self-mastery and leadership, they go hand in hand. You can't be an exceptional leader unless you have self-mastery. And self-mastery is so built on such old, outdated paradigms, which is why I call it neuromastery, because you have to be able to master your brain and your nervous system. There's no other choice. And like I said, what's coming down the pipeline, it's going to be those who have strongest ability to master their own brain and to stay elevated and maintain elite standards that's going to be able to help other people. You can't fake it anymore. You've gone long enough people faking leadership and it's crumbling, right? We're going to see the collapse, and we're already seeing the collapse of it. And so it's on each individual to master this first before you start trying to transfer it over to the people that you lead. It doesn't work like that. Like it doesn't work like you can't keep faking leadership.
Looking around, we're surrounded by subpar leaders at all stages of life. If we could just get this information to them, we sure would all benefit, right? But
I can't wait to one day where we start talking about, instead of mental health in this, we're talking about brain injuries. This is a physical problem that needs physical solutions. So it's brain injury, brain damage. Those aren't like words to like hide from. It's not psychological injury. It's not mental injury. Like stop using those words. It's doing more damage. We got to be, hey, this is a physical brain injury. What do we need to do to be able to change it ourselves first and then teach that skill to others? Right? And I have said this before, I do not teach anything I haven't already mastered. So this is 100%, you're able to do this. You just were likely unaware that you had the capabilities to actually master your brain.
Brain medicine, is that different than a neurologist or a psychiatrist?
What for the brain?
Just did the whole, I guess, specialty of it.
Well, mine's in neurobiology. So mine is definitely brain and body based, the whole nervous system, which is different than neurology is more just brain based. So sometimes I do say, brain-based approach because it's kind of easier for people to understand. But then I realized I kept leaving out their body. I was like, wait, you have a nervous system. You've got sensory input. And that's another thing. That sensory input for first responders, well, for everyone, but specifically for first responders, has changed. it's different. So you have to know it has changed over time through trauma exposure and chronic stress. You have to be aware of that so that you have the skills in place to change your nervous system back. Like you were saying, Ed, with your military experience, you were so trained to go one way, that two-state trap, but not trained to come back from it. And that's what's happened with veterans. You're not trained to come back. It's not that they can't. They have no training awareness that it's possible. So they, of course, blame themselves because they do everything that society has told them to do. They're the toughest that there is. And then they're suffering, and then they internalize it. And I got a real problem with that because it's so unfair. It angers me. That's good anger, right? And it's redirected towards change. And that's the other point when we talk about anger. Yeah, that's a normal emotion. You have to have anger, right? But make sure it's directed in a positive way. Make sure it's expressed in a positive way. But don't just keep acting like, well, it doesn't happen to me. You know, I don't have brain injury. Yeah, you do.
Going back to the isolation, we think we can just kind of down and in. We can fix it ourselves. We'll just suffer in silence. Last year, we had 2 local officer suicides, and we had a SWAT small group for about 10 years. And we actually started an outpost. It's underneath Mighty Oaks. And we started with the hopes that we would draw people in. And some of Mighty Oaks' foundation is vulnerability and transparency. This past year, we've met twice a month, and we have grown to about anywhere between 20 and 25 individuals. And time after time, I see grown men in there breaking down in tears because it's a safe environment. And they're unloading some of the things that they're currently going through, they have gone through. So we need that fellowship. We need that tribe of individuals that we can know and trust to be able to help sort through some of these things. I agree that self-mastery is the beginning, but also having an output, having a core group of individuals that you can lean into when things aren't going the way that you expected, when trauma does occur. Because the way I look at it is we've all been through storms, are going through a storm, or will go through a storm. It's just a matter of when. And so, my encouragement to the vets out there, to the law enforcement individuals, find that core group of individuals to lean into to help process that have the like-minded, that we are, we're warriors, and get with an individual. Some of the things that for me, I was a little bit resistant going to like a church small group because I didn't relate to them. I found individuals that I do relate to, that have shared experiences that I can trust, and I know to open up about some of the trauma and the experiences that I've gone through.
Well, I just want to comment first on what Ed was saying, because I really want to highlight that. And I also want to emphasize that it is a brotherhood without a doubt. So yes, there are women, but there's strength in that brotherhood. I come in, I'm not the same, right? So I really stick with education. And although I still do one-on-one advising, it's different. That's not my place. So I'm really glad that you spoke about creating these groups for men. I don't know if there's women there too, but they're usually men. You guys are leading. And this is why I'm saying you need more leaders to step up and create this, but you have to have the education in place. Because what I was saying before, you got peer support, and the people that are trying to lead are suffering at epic levels themselves, and they're faking it. So I have a problem with that because they're doing more harm than good. But for somebody like yourself that has stepped into that role and can lead a brotherhood, then that's so admirable, and that's actually what's needed.
I was just thinking of 2 individuals that I've recently spoken with. They happen to be retired police chiefs, and they were telling me how they are proponents of high-stakes leadership education in all forms, because that's what's needed. It's a reinforcement for them.
Yeah. And my work is only supported and only can move forward with the support of alpha leaders. It's them. They have to give the green flag and say, okay, she's safe. She knows what she's talking about. Otherwise, it can't continue. Not in this space, because that's the pecking order. And the alphas are running the show. So if they don't give the green light, it doesn't matter what I have to say. They're not going to listen. It's not safe enough for them to step forward and even want to be educated. They're definitely gatekeepers. And so I'm always very, very appreciative that ones that are brave enough to go, oh yeah, hey, by the way, she really does know what she's talking about. You may want to listen.
Guys.
I think I loved having the opportunity to hear more about your story, Ed, and thank you so much for being part of this. I really appreciate your time and all that you have done in service for others. I want to say I'm very grateful for that as well.
And I too am very grateful. I really appreciate y'all having me and opening this door for me to be able to come share some of my experience. And as I'm sitting in here learning, that was probably the funnest part of this, was just sitting here taking in what both of y'all are saying. And so thank y'all too. I appreciate it very much.
And thank you to you, Robert, for always setting this up and giving this platform, because it's so valuable.
Well, this will conclude another episode of Bets and Badges. We want to thank you, the audience, Dr. Serafin, and Dr. Edward Buckman for their participation in this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. You can catch us on all major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, iHeart, or our betsandbadges.com website. Look forward to speaking with you next time. Thank you.